About?
Yeah. On the Israel website. I worked for 11 years for the state Connecticut Judicial Branch, Law Library at Stanford. At the start of my employment, I filed an affirmative action complaint against my supervisor, Jonathan Stock. I complained because Mr. Stock had grabbed my chest and he would follow me around, ignore me, and corner me. In 2002, I filed another complaint against Jonathan Stock, who at that point was again following me around and yelling at me. Because it had happened previously, the union argued that it was attached to the first complaint and that it was sexual harassment. In a document which I'm about to send you, the union and the employer, the judicial branch, signed off on it being so, and said that they would revisit the situation in 6 months. Neither side did. Around 2005, another employee, Caroline Fox, filed a lawsuit against the state of Connecticut Judicial Branch, where she stated that the supervisor was sexually harassing her and was discriminating against her. I'm about to send you that document right now.
Okay.
During that time with Caroline, my supervisor didn't really bother me. She was more concerned with the lawsuit that was against him. And I actually felt sorry for him because he seemed to be very distraught by it. Caroline eventually withdrew her complaint without prejudice. Basically, when lawsuits are settled, that's how they word it, that the plaintiff will withdraw the complaint without prejudice, allowing them to bring it again if the settlement isn't adhered to. It allowed her to refile it. Shortly after Caroline retired, which was, I believe, September of 2006, my supervisor again started harassing me. He kept telling me that he had help now.
Go ahead.
That the judicial had come to his rescue, to his support or whatever. In March of 2007, again, he started chasing me around. I had to lock myself in the bathroom 3 times within a week's period of time. There were no witnesses because it was after work. Looking back at it, I realized that he did that because he was being calculating. And I went to the person, Lee Julian, who was then the affirmative action officer, and I tried to be nicer this time because I was afraid of retaliation or whatever. I also went to my union. Neither did very much. And the harassment continued. It was sporadic. But in September of 2007, I filed a CHRO harassment and discrimination complaint, which the state waited out the time. After 2 years, you no longer have a legal way to address the wrong that was done to just sort of went away, and a lot of lawyers didn't want to take it. During that same period of time, from I'd say June until the current time, I had also reported wrongdoing that I had become aware of within the state, fraudulent mileage, people being promoted, like that.
Fraudulent mileage mean that there's employees that would say that they racked up miles they didn't, and then they were paid for miles that they didn't rack up. And were they encouraged by management to do this?
Yeah, in one case, the employee lived in Stanford and collected mileage from Bridgeport. What people don't tell you is that when temporary employees are hired, whatever town they live in, that courthouse is considered the courthouse. That's considered their home courthouse, even though they're not in that courthouse, even though they come to another courthouse. In one case, a person lived in New Britain and was being paid mileage from New Britain to Stanford and back every day. I added up the mileage cost, and it was around $1,500 a month that she was getting.
And did she deserve all of it or none of it?
Pardon?
Did she deserve the entire $1,500, or was there less that she was entitled to?
Well, the state didn't need to go to Britain to find a court monitor to work. They chose that. You know, there are court monitors all over the state, and in this woman's case, her story is not unknown to happen other places. I became aware of people that, you know, would get the mileage, and, you know, that mileage is tax-free. You know, it's considered an expense that's paid. And, she wasn't the only one that got it. There have been other people. I just don't have that documentation or that proof. But she was also writing with her husband, who was a permanent employee of the branch. So they were getting mileage in the amount of what they would have to pay for rent and utilities to live in Stanford.
Is it widespread in the judicial branch that there's taxpayer money going to people that shouldn't be getting it, and it's for more than it should be?
Oh yeah, it's a pretty commonality. If you were to discuss this with other employees, they would tell you people that they knew that lived quite a distance away, but, you know, would take temporary mileage like that. I mean, there are other things that happen too. For instance, during the whole budget crisis, the law libraries where I worked would hold book club meetings where the libraries where they were stationed, the librarians would go on staff and, you know, while they attended these book club meetings, and there would be mileage paid to each and every single person that attended those meetings. So they also receive mileage. There are a lot of cases where that's used as a resource for people just to, you know, have a day out in the office. Time out in the office.
You've mentioned that that there's cleaning of courthouses. There's a private company that basically gets most of the contracts, and they can, you know, do pretty much whatever they want, possibly bill even for hours not worked, and that they're paid no matter what.
I don't know that is exactly the way that I put it. I said that there's a problem with privatization of services within the state. costs of operating, they hire subcontractors who come in and also do the building. So after the building closes in the evening, a group of people will come in and do the cleaning. That group of people is not regulated by the state as far as what they should be paid, need to be paid, so on and so forth.
Interpreters, did they originally work for the state, and were they was it privatized so there could be more of them, and then friends of important people in the judicial branch in Connecticut would get more money by knowing somebody? Is that correct?
Well, sure. If getting more money means that you get businesses that you might not have previously received. I mean, when I say businesses, I mean there are employees that have their spouses put a company in their name, and then they come in and they are part of their contract, or friends of friends. The subcontractors are not held to the same standards that the clean contracting bill calls for.
So you need to be related to somebody, or be friends with somebody to get the best contracts, and those people get preference?
Well, that's a very cut and dry way of putting it, and not necessarily factual. You normally know how much you should bid, but the biggest problem is not necessarily the contractor that comes in and replaces the state employees. The biggest problem is the subcontractors that they hire. So it looks like it's costing, I want to say $1 million a year to keep up a building. Pardon me, but there's more money that goes out because of the subcontractors that they call in to actually do some of the work. In some cases, I've heard, and I don't have proof of it, but I've heard that, they have to have people come in and change lights, and that's a subcontractor that comes in and does it. And that's not something that's clear and in the budget for the taxpayers to see.
So they don't need somebody outside to change light bulbs?
No, in fact, when I worked in our old building, it was very seldom that a subcontractor came in, or a contractor. Normally the people that were paid to maintain the building were employees of the state, and they took care of the entire building. What they will do is they'll just allow those positions now, because they're bringing in so many subcontractors and contractors, that when a building, like in the Danbury Courthouse, I heard that they're going private. They've been working understaffed for years now, where they should have had 4 people working at all times, or 4 people on the payroll as state employees. They have 3. So the contractor comes in with a low-ball bid, and then, that's the bid for the people that they have actually working there and the supplies that they have. But then they call in subcontractors for other work. That's where the money gets spent. And people that are in the know, know that if they take a position as a subcontractor, they can hire people at below the state minimum. And that is not the state minimum wage, but the state minimum for contracting. Because Connecticut has a bill that says that, people have to be paid a living wage when they're contracting work out for the state. And the people that are there full time are paid that wage. The people that come in afterwards, however, are not.
What happens to people that, from the inside, that exposed wrongdoing, they exposed defrauding of the taxpayers, they exposed breaking of the law by insiders and their minions.
Well, in my case, I mean, because I was both a whistleblower and a victim of discrimination and harassment, they work on building a case. In my case, I was supervised, and the only person that was not in supervisory position, I should mention, by 5 different people who, 2 at a time, would watch me while they also worked. They'd keep track of when I went to the bathroom, or if somebody came and spoke to me, if I had a phone call, if I made a phone call, all kinds of things. But 2 people at a time kept track of me, and they did so with diaries. You know, they kept a diary every day of what I did.
So you were being watched so they could fire you and harass you, scare you.
Right, and they treated me differently than any other employee in our department. No other employee has a diary kept on them like that. I mean, I've got hundreds of pages of diaries.
So it's retaliation.
Yeah, and again, my union failed to do anything. They refused to file anything, and then I did file a whistleblower retaliation complaint. And what the people of the great state of Connecticut have no idea is that there is this whistleblower law that is supposed to protect people. But if you're in a union, in a labor union, and your union files a grievance, the union owns the grievance. The grievance doesn't own the grievance, which means that, in my case, all of the grievances that were filed on my behalf were never signed by me. But because they were filed, it was determined that I could not prevail as a whistleblower because the union had filed a grievance.
So those that are trying to protect you actually prevent you from getting any sort of justice. The employees...
I'm not saying that they tried to protect me. That's not something you would hear me say. I'm saying that they assisted management in dealing with me because along with my other complaint, I had discovered that our union president had a job created specifically for her, one that paid her between $12,000 and $15,000 more a year than her position would have paid her. They actually elevated her to a supervisory position that already has another name. It's called deputy clerk, but they didn't call it a deputy clerk.
In the judicial branch in Connecticut, do they allow for deputies to be, part of the system, or is that just positions that were made up so they could bilk taxpayers?
No, the deputy clerk positions are legitimate positions. They are the supervisors of the assistant clerks. They oversee, they have a very long and they have a long job description, and they have a lot of responsibility. In this woman's case, they created the position of First Assistant Juvenile Matters Clerk. They made a position for her.
And is that something that they're allowed to do as part of their charter of the judicial branch?
Well, it's something that because the state, and it's not even just because of the state, I'm sure that it's done other places, but no, the state of Connecticut has no jurisdiction over judicial jobs. Pretty much they can do what they want to do.
So if they want to charge the taxpayers any amount of money at any time, it seems like they'd be able to do that?
If they want to create a position for somebody, yeah, you can go to the Judicial webpage, look at the directory of staff, and you'll see that there's 36 deputy directors listed. One of those deputy directors oversees only 3 people, 3 or 4 people.
So, and we're talking about six.
For the judge support services. So he only has 3 employees under him.
So we're talking about 6-figure jobs, correct?
Yeah, we're talking about jobs that if you go to Deputy Director 1, 2, or 3, because it doesn't say what number they are. So they can make up to like $140,000 without longevity a year. My average, which was very uneducated, was about $100,000 a year. So you've got 35 people being paid $100,000 a year plus. And then adding the longevity. But you know that they're making $100,000 a year roughly, if you were to average it out. Yeah. And then, you know, there's also the created position of program manager.
Do you have to show? Do you have to show up for work? Is there any responsibility where you absolutely have to do your job? And can you take an extended period of time off and still be paid?
Well, you pretty much, you do have to show up for work. I can give you a good example of waste. There was a woman, Lorraine Murphy, and you can, you know, this is, I'm giving you her name, so it's, you know, it's okay to use it. She was a trial court administrator, which was sort of, those were sort of made-up positions too. They had chief clerks and they had trial court administrators. And this was years ago. And she had a lot of complaints against her. She had issues. And she had been acting very badly for a very long time. She would do things like call people in the middle of the night for no good reason, just because she had issues. And what the branch decided to do, you can check with people in the Bridgeport courthouse too. I'm sure some of them will verify it. She was pulled out of Stanford and then put in Bridgeport and placed in charge of quote-unquote special projects. So she had a basement office in Bridgeport for years, I think until she passed away. But she's a perfect example of just the total waste. And that's what they do with people that are non-union too. They tend to make an arrangement with them because they don't want a lawsuit. But if you were to, go through the records and see who was what and what was where, you find that a lot of people either were given another chance someplace else at their same pay rate, or they were allowed to stay home until they retired. A perfect example of that was my supervisor that I mentioned to you previously, who had, in total, the number of complaints that I know of, there were 3 different ones from me, and then one from Ms. Foss, whose complaint I sent to you that's available on the Federal District Court webpage. But he had 4 complaints within, the 10 years that I worked with him, because the last year he was allowed to use up all of the sick time, which amounted to 16 months, and then retire with the golden handshake.
That was Jonathan Scott?
Stock, S-T-O-C-K.
Okay. The Government Employees Union, do you think that they work against taxpayers by allowing abuse to continue and allowing waste?
Well, I think that, I should allow other people to come to their own conclusion. I mean, if you think about it, with regards to the union allowed a president of the union to take a position paying her substantially more per year than she had originally had. Now, right after she received that promotion, she failed to follow through on grievances. She just simply either stopped filing them or stopped following through on them, but she stopped doing her job. And, then I was the vice president of the union, and the union knowingly allowed management to not only build a case against me, which was, that's something that sometimes can't prevent it, but they allowed me to be harassed and humiliated and to be monitored so closely that it was an invasion of my privacy. I mean, if I signed out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I got something from the court service center, from the law library, they wrote it down. How are they, violating me as far as timing my bathroom breaks, writing down anyone that ever talks to me when I work in a public place is one thing. But, following me when I'm on my break and seeing who I talk to and what I do, that's not only to take dollars that they're using to do that, an invasion of my privacy, but, people go to the law libraries with an expectation that they'll be able to work on their private complaints.
You're talking about the public.
Right. So, when I signed out, if I signed out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever, I was a member of the public. They were violating me as a member of the public.
So if they're spying on employees that are in the law library, they'd be spying on the public. Did they have private investigators or others following whistleblowers around? And do people that complained, did they have... what's that?
It wasn't private investigators. It was judicial branch staff.
That would follow you around, and were friends of yours or others that you know that complained, were they harassed, or were they made to feel that the person making a complaint was not legitimate by scaring people around them, friends and family?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I was vice president of the entire union. Okay? Now, if they could do this to me, how do you think the people would feel about them doing it to them?
Well, basically anybody under you would fear for their jobs, fear for their family, fear for owning their home, would fear everything.
Right. And that's the other thing. They're hiring people, but they still have all, they're hiring people for new jobs. But if you, and I believe that I sent this to you, if you look at, the administrative positions that existed in 1999, and then you look at how many exist now in 2009, the growth of judicial management has been exponential.
So the population of Connecticut may have gone down. They actually went down in congressmen, which would say to me that they have less population. So if they double or triple or whatever the size of the judicial branch, it sounds like they're gouging taxpayers.
Yeah, well, it's not so much that they're doubling or tripling the employees of the judicial branch. That's a very broad statement. They're doubling, at least doubling. They have. The administrative positions that exist. Those are positions that are outside of a bargaining unit, a labor union. They don't have a labor union. They're managerial positions. That's the real problem. The problem is, I don't know how many program managers there are, but those guys make a decent amount of money. All those positions are recently created positions. They did not exist in 1998 or 1999. There were not 35 deputy directors in 1999. Those positions have grown.
So it's a lot of...
It's not so much that there's lots of employees, because there's a lot of places that are very understaffed. The problem is that they're creating management positions, and they've got too much cream at the top.
So they have all these chiefs and no Indians.
Right. That's another way to put it.
What could be done to clean up the system? Because it sounds like there's judicial managers like Joe DeLessio and others that more or less are the real rulers of Connecticut, and it's probably the same in other states. How would you fix the system so the taxpayers get what they pay for, and that the system is fair and these people aren't abused?
Well, here would be my suggestion. And it might not be real popular with a lot of people, but I'll give you my suggestion and then I'll explain why. Okay? If they had, instead of Joe DeLessio or Siganofi or Carbone or any of those, out of there, and they had judges that were administrators that, had to go to the state. Their ethics are closely monitored. Every few years they have to go before the Judiciary Committee to be reassigned. And even though there's problems with that, and there have been at times, it's a way of keeping everything out of the open. Right now you've got a group of people that don't have to answer to anyone. They never have, and they never will. There's nobody that's going to review their conduct. They don't get reappointed. Their jobs just keep going on and on and on until they determine that they're going to leave state service. And many of them make more than a judge makes. So there's no end to their positions. Their positions just keep going on and on and on. So you can bring in a chief justice and maybe you've got the same managers to work. It's still the same group of people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And the Judiciary Committee in Connecticut, I guess about 2/3 of those people are lawyers, and there's no full-time legislature in Connecticut. So these lawyers depend on being in good graces with the judicial branch. So they work for the legislative branch, but here they are making their bread and butter, side deals, and just being friends with important people and getting along and just doing whatever is wanted by the judicial branch and those important. They seem to advance and do well, and they're not you're having the foxes.
I don't agree with your statement there. I don't agree with your statement at all there. I know some of the people in the Judiciary Committee, and for the most part, they're decent people that maybe want to create a change. Their hands are tied as far as the branch goes. Now, when it comes to appointments of judges and all that, that's one thing. But what I hear you saying is that the Judiciary Committee needs to be cleaned up. And I'm not certain that that's true. There's a need for people on the Judiciary Committee to be lawyers because they have to understand the law. And it's been my experience with them, and don't get me wrong, there are times when I'm very frustrated with the whole system. But it's been my personal experience with them that they try to be decent. They try to ask the tough questions. I don't know if you saw the interview where Charles Howley spoke at one of the committee meetings. The legislature really tried to assist him with his very legitimate complaints about how the temporary employees treated as far as their pay and stuff like that. Just because there's some people that take advantage of the system doesn't mean that that they all do. And there are temporary employees that have been temporary employees forever within the judicial branch. And Andrew McDonald really tried to help them by asking the hard questions. When Judge Lavery got up and he started to speak and he was asking for a raise for judges, the Judicial Committee pretty much slammed him. Did you see that interview?
I believe I didn't. I've been at Judiciary Committee meetings where judges with no experience that were friends of Governor Rell of Connecticut, judges that abused families, the legislators were talking about how these judges abused individuals, families, and were just harming children, were reappointed. And it was just basically a rubber stamp. And they were complaining amongst themselves. And so, you mentioned something about, the judges being nominated and then approved. That's a little bit dirty, at least, right?
It is, but I can't think of a system that's better. Personally, there are judges that are appointed and they are recommended by, the governor. And it is political. On the other hand, if judges run for office, that's political too, right?
Yeah.
So, I only know of two ways judges get picked, and those are the two ways. It's either appointment or election. And, I hear some of the same problems that exist in other states with regard to the judges. So, I don't know. I just know it's a way of calling them on the carpet as far as their lives being, clean. Every few years, they go before the Judiciary Committee. And the Judiciary Committee can vote whether or not they remain judges. Now, while your point is very well taken, and I agree with it, I don't necessarily blame the Judiciary Committee. They have to work with what's there before them. You're right, those appointments came from Governor Rell. And that's a fact. I'm sorry?
Ken Krajewski, he's a law student, and he was also the Green Party campaign manager for the Green Party candidate for governor. He basically talked about Rell in the newspapers, and he was basically a political activist. So what he said wasn't liked, so he's put on the Connecticut State Police secret enemies list, and he was arrested on site. They have, if you complain about judges or the police in Connecticut, they put you on a list. So he was arrested, and it was the Judiciary Committee in Connecticut that put up such a fuss. Here's a law student who's going to be a lawyer. Maybe 2/3 of them are a lawyer. And so Ken Krajewski's case is front and center, where there's been a long history of people that aren't lawyers are abused in Connecticut, arrested, they can go to prison, or just harassed within the system, outside the system. If you say boo, they go after you. And here this lawyer, a law student, they do something about his case where he doesn't end up being in prison just for, being out walking. So the Judiciary Committee seems to have been aware that there's a enemies list where you can be arrested and then you're barbecued in court where your case is fixed. Something was done in his case, but not for the average person.
So they did do something for him?
Yes, he's not in jail now.
Okay. Well, you're making a statement to me, and, I don't know how to respond to that.
What I'm saying is they do act in certain cases. Ken Krajewski, being a law student, could eventually be part of the insides of the court system, and he was wronged. The average person that goes to the Judiciary Committee, you elect officials to act on your behalf, and they seem, you wouldn't know this, but judicial activists, people that have been wrong, come and ask for some just basic help, and they're not getting it, and where somebody else does, and then Ken Krieski's case got a lot of ink, based on if you're politically behind a candidate as a campaign manager and you end up in prison, that would look bad for the United States, never mind Connecticut.
I don't know about that particular case, and I do know that I've reached out to people in the legislature to help me, but that doesn't mean that they can, or that they're willing to risk it at that point. I don't fault them for not stepping up for me, because it is complicated, it is political, and I can't say that I would ask the Judiciary Committee to, I never have asked them to take my case or to do something. So, I can't speak for everyone. I do know that legislators don't get paid a whole lot. And B, normally, especially the people that have been there forever, they do care about what they're doing. I would like it if somebody stepped up and helped me, but I didn't ask them to. And I haven't experienced going to them and not getting anything in return. I know that when Charles Hawley went to speak, that they were very kind to him. He still ended up with nothing. They tried to hold the branch responsible, but he still didn't get anything. And Andrew Matthews, who was a state police officer, who was a whistleblower, testified before the Judiciary Committee. And he was in the same position that I am. His union had filed a grievance, so he lost his whistleblower case with state. I think that with regard to the topic that you and I are talking about, the question would be, why is the state of Connecticut spending so much money to hire 6 or 7 hearing officers for the Office of Public Hearings when no cases are ever resolved in the manner in which the law was created?
All right.
I think that's a question that I could ask. I don't think I could say, why isn't the Judiciary Committee doing whatever, because Lawrence Cafaro, when the whistleblower law was being argued, wanted to make sure that if people belonged to a union, that they could not have the union file a grievance and then, have their complaint heard within the whistleblower unit of the CHRO. I think that's a better question to ask. Why does an organization exist that will never meet the goals of its orientation, of its organization? I have no idea how much those guys make. They have an office and they have staff, and they never have a case decided in favor of a complainant.
You're talking about the Connecticut Commission of Human Rights, and
yeah, the OPH, the Office of Public Hearings.
So if somebody complains to them, have they ever, to your knowledge, found in the favor of the complainant, or do they always just?
No, the cases are all dismissed.
The cases are all just dismissed?
What?
Are dismissed, or they don't help the person who complained?
No, the cases get dismissed, and the person doesn't get help, and the person normally ends up without a job or finding some other recourse. And if the person is a member of the clerical workers union lot of money. Well, the person will eventually go away, or they'll talk to somebody like you and give an interview and still not have a job.
So basically, people comply within legislators, within the judicial branch, out of fear, because if you complain about anybody within the system with power in Connecticut and probably other states, they'll go after you. You'll be without a job. You could have your family broken up, lose your home, ability to get a job, and you can even end up in prison. Would that be a fair statement?
I don't know. I don't know part of it as being a fair statement. I know that they can come after you and that you can lose your job. The rest of it, I don't know. I have not experienced that as of yet.
Have you known it to happen to other people where they were complaining and then they end up either fearing prison or in prison?
I have not known anybody personally that worked for the judicial branch that ended up in prison because they complained. I've known people that lost their jobs. They've suffered an economic death penalty. But I have no personal knowledge of somebody that, ended up in prison or whatever. I mean, I know that you have spoken about cases that you know of, but I do not have personal knowledge of that. I've not experienced it.
Is it possible in the judicial branch to fix court cases? Is it possible to manufacture evidence or destroy evidence because the judicial branch is not secure?
Well, I would say anything is possible. How probable it is, I don't know. No, the judicial branch is not secure when you have people coming in that are not checked in the evenings, that work for probably substandard wages, or, work part-time cleaning a building. I would guess that there's a very good possibility that, things could happen. I know that I testified in December of 2007 in a hearing that you were at, and I addressed a situation whereby one of the private contractors was cleaning a judge's chambers, and that judge was left one-on-one with that person because that person was part of a cleaning crew. And the person reached in their pocket, and out fell, I think, cocaine, and the judge did call the police. Now, I don't know how secure that judge was in that situation because, what if that guy decided he didn't want to be arrested? And that was one of the private contractors that we're talking about.
And that worked for somebody that's important to get the contract. So it's somebody that had the contract isn't taking care of vetting out who they hire. And if that person's involved next to the judge, he has access to files. So in an important criminal case, files could be lost, computer files could be erased or added to, correct?
Well, simply put, files, lots of things can happen to files. I mean, I suspect that's why a lot of lawyers in the state don't want to go up against the branch because they don't want to risk their files being lost. The judicial branch is not a place where people want to go up against it because files are hard copy, they can go anywhere.
All right.
So what you're talking about, it's conceivable, I guess, that it could happen. But, people want to be careful because the cases are very important.
There's a rumor in Connecticut that, Governor John G. Rowland basically, was doing quite well, quite powerful. He could have ended up being president of the United States. I mean, he's, was basically groomed, by the Republican Party. Both Presidents Bush referred to him as Johnny, and there's a rumor that he upset some judges in Connecticut or some judicial managers in Connecticut, and that's why he ended up doing a year in prison, not for taking bribes, not for doing illegal things, but for having upset the powers that be in the judicial branch. Would you have any ideas on that?
No, not at all. That's like being really straight off the topic that we agreed to talk about.
Okay.
So that's concerning to me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, there's no way I can address a rumor. I don't know. You know, I mean, I have my own thoughts on why Governor Rowland ended up in trouble. But those are just my thoughts.
Okay.
They're not, there's no factual basis to them. I mean, I'm not sure how you're going to use this, if you're going to use it verbally or if you're going to go through and listen to things and type it up. But it's my hope that you would allow me to present the facts that I know.
Okay.
And not go on conjunction and rumor, you know? I mean, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I think it hurts what I'm trying to say. It's like when you videotaped my statement at the hearing that day, people really got the wrong impression. I wasn't saying that I was saying that these private contractors would come in and replace state employees. What they're doing. They're replacing people that we know who they are, we know what they do, they've been around for a number of years, they've earned the trust of people around them, and suddenly they're displaced by this private contracting company that comes in and has access to the building, but also violates public trust by hiring a subcontractor that they don't have to check out the background of people. I mean, think about it. If a subcontractor company is coming in with a cleaning crew, and they're not held to the same standards as the state employees are, or even that the regular contractor is held to, then how secure is anything?
You're only as strong as your weak.
I mean, in the Stanford train station, Fusco, who was the contractor for the Stanford train station, hired a subcontractor to come in and do the cleaning of the ladies' rooms. That subcontractor videotaped women in the bathroom.
Was that at the courthouse or at the train station?
It was at the train station, but it's still the same regular contractor that hired a subcontractor. The guy that they eventually caught he had a record, a previous record, so he's in a building that people are supposed to be secure with the people that are working there, I believe. You know, if you're in a public building like a train station, one would hope that, you know, there's a certain amount of security, at least with the people that work there. So the guy had a record, and he was an illegal immigrant, which I'm not making a statement either way about the person because he was not here legally. That wasn't necessarily my point. My point is they did no background check on it. Now, Fusco hired this subcontracting company who hired this guy, ended up with little or no responsibility because they hired a subcontractor. Now, what about all the other subcontractors that are going into state buildings? It's not just the contractor when the state contracts out. It's all the subcontractors that work for them.
And is it friends of judicial managers that tend to get the contracts, and then the contractor pays people as little as possible to pocket as much as possible? Was that the general gist?
I have heard that the contractors, you know, there's different contractors throughout the state, that they do know people. I've heard people say that somebody has gone to a Fusco party or an Illinois party, or whatever people contractors hire subcontractors. So when they're giving the bill to the state, the bill is not whole. The bill says that the contracting company does this, but then the contractor hires a subcontractor, which falls into another fiscal realm altogether. That's not part of it. So you can take from that statement anything that you think is logical. I'm not saying decidedly either way what I think is going on because I don't know. But just think about it. You know, if you go to a courthouse in the state of Connecticut, any courthouse, you go through a metal detector. Your purse, your belongings are x-rayed when they go in. Alright? Now we've got this contractor that comes in that, you know, they may do a police check on them or whatever, or a background check. But, so they're probably pretty clean. But then they bring in these subcontractors to do all this other work. And they also don't go through a metal detector. They don't get anything checked. And maybe there is a background check and maybe there isn't. But the subcontractors are not held to the same standard as the contractors. And the way the contractors make their money is by lowballing a figure, making it look like that's how much they're paying, but then hiring a subcontractor to come in and actually do the cleaning, which is the everyday upkeep of the building.
All right.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, you know, there's a very good possibility that some of these people might do something that's not right. In the case of the Stanford train station, one contractor did. We don't know how many others do it because it gets washed. People don't talk about it. But the reality is, they're not checked. There's no real background check. And, you know, instead of having state employees that you know you have some control over, you've got these people that come in and every few years there's a new contract and a new contractor that comes in to fill it.
The public hearing that was at the Bridgeport court, where you spoke, where I spoke, the individuals that are on the panel that are supposed to do something about the quality control of the judicial branch, the managers, do you feel that they're more about covering up and retaliating than they are investigating and fixing problems that were brought up to at public hearings such as those?
Yes, this is a very easy question to answer. Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. I think that they're more about covering it up and fixing it. A perfect example of that is that Joe DeLessio, right after the hearing, took Dan, I can't remember his last name, the reporter from the Connecticut Post aside, and sort of directed Dan on who to make aware of things, you know. Dan did not talk about the employees that spoke about corruption within the judicial branch. He talked about other people that were there speaking. There was absolutely no mention of myself or the other employee that spoke out. So, I mean, of course, Dan has a parking spot in the staff garage at the Bridgeport courthouse, so he probably has a certain amount of loyalty to the Bridgeport, you know, to the judicial branch because, you know, you've got a nice parking spot and even an office there, I believe, on the fourth floor of the Bridgeport courthouse. So it's pretty easy to control what he says and does because, you know, he gets benefits.
So there's a steering committee where they steer the media and steer what is being basically written about or spoken about even on TV. There was a judicial branch meeting with the media, how to open up the judicial branch and all this hoopla. I met Supreme Court Justice in Connecticut, Chase Rogers, and others, and it basically was hidden in the judicial branch, where there's only 3 members of the public, which I was one of them, and they were surprised. And it seemed like they were the media was hobnobbing with the judicial branch. So what I noticed is different members that had been doing decent stories on what was wrong or just a little bit of reporting after meetings like that really are, throwing softballs and not reporting the actual corruption now.
Well, I think that creating the Judicial Media Committee was a very strategic. It was a brilliant strategic plan by the people that created it, because you're correct. The press no longer seems to pay very much attention to the issues that exist within the judicial branch.
And
in fact, they tend to blatantly ignore them and show absolutely no interest in them.
well, there's bloggers can only, somebody like me can only. I have no money to go and investigate the judicial branch, and I would be very fearful of, driving around and doing so. But the only checks and balances that I've seen that actually do something is when a story of abuse ends up in the newspaper, then something's done about it. So if the TV and mainstream media and newspaper don't pick up a story, then they basically can do whatever they want to anybody, anytime, is what I'm seeing more and more.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's face it. You moved out of the state of Connecticut because it just got too unbearable for you to live here, right?
Basically, when I was put on parole after being in prison, I was attacked by a police informant on my property after having gone to legislators about not wanting heroin sold on my rental properties, and the police not wanting to do something about it. They had their informants, they were paying them, so I was told to shut up and leave the state. So then when I was let out of prison, the parole officer said, you'll go back to prison if you complain about police officers. I went to the ACLU. The probation officer said, either you leave the state or you're going back to prison because I'll violate you. So basically, in order not to spend the rest of my life in jail for having exposed public corruption, I had to leave the state.
Okay, well, now, can you imagine what happens to a newspaper editor or whatever? There was a guy named Vincent Bull, I can't remember his last name.
Vincent Valbo?
Of the Connecticut Law Review.
Vincent Valbo, I believe.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know this, but after Vincent was real strong on saying what he believed. And that came out in the paper on a regular basis. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but he was replaced by somebody else. American Lawyer Media replaced him. And he moved on to something else. But I don't know if you knew this or not, but it was not too long after that the Connecticut courts allowed the Connecticut Law Tribune to come back into the courthouses. Did you know that they banned it?
No, they just reported a story they didn't like, and then so they banned that newspaper?
They banned it for years. For years. The judges weren't allowed subscriptions to it unless they paid for it on their own, because the state will pay for the subscription for them. Because it reports the legal news. I mean, that's logical. But even in the law libraries, it was forbidden to purchase the Connecticut Law Review.
Wow.
So, I mean, you couldn't do it with state funds. It had to come from someplace else. So, some of the law libraries would have patrons who donated their subscription or whatever. But no law library was allowed to pay for it. So it was banned from all the Connecticut courts.
That's pretty amazing. So
After Vincent left, they allowed it back in again because they had a more friendly publisher.
So basically, free speech is banned in the judicial branch.
For years it was, yeah.
Well, I mean, if they...
After Andy Talbot Michael Knight story.
And Andy Tebow?
2000.
Okay, Andy Tebow?
I can't say the last name, and I don't know how to spell it. But he and Norm Paddocks had run stories.
Uh-huh.
And the judges didn't like it. They compared one judge to Michael Knight. Is that the guy's name?
Michael Might? I'm not sure.
Maybe a sports player or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And they had banned the newspaper. Well, they eventually let the newspaper back in, but it was only after this other publisher came up.
So what Norm Paddocks exposed fairly upset the judicial branch.
Right, Norm and this other writer, Andy.
Okay. I think it's the Cool Justice blog that Andy Tebow writes, and that he's written about on his blog organized crime, how it has infiltrated the judicial branch. If I recall reading correctly, my memory of it, and there's quite a bit of dirt that's been published by him, and there's quite the history. Even there's a book called Squeal.
I know, and he talks about Judge Santinella, right?
You would know more than I would. What's the?
He wrote about the whole thing where the kid got ran over by a car, and it was the mayor of New London that ran over the kid, and that Judge Santinella covered it up.
So it's something that's not unheard of, that judges cover up for friends of theirs. I would assume that on the other side of the coin, that if somebody hasn't done something wrong and they've been mouthy and they've gotten in the way of some important people, that person also gets nailed, whereas they wouldn't have in a fair system.
Well, Judge Santinella's daughter, the judge that Andy wrote about, she's a manager in the judicial branch.
Cure?
Mm-hmm.
Is her last name Cure?
Yeah.
Maria?
Mm-hmm.
Maria Cure. And is that her married name?
Huh?
Is that her married name?
I believe so.
And is she married to a state police officer in a?
I believe that's correct.
Is his last name Cure, or is it something else?
I think it's Cure. I'm not sure.
All right, so there's it sounds like there's some sort of connection between the state police brass and the judicial branch. That would be just one where information can be fed back and forth. I'm not saying that you have knowledge of it, but it sounds like people in power are married and part of a family, that the information can go back and forth, and cases can get fixed, and people can get retaliated against. Is that a fair assessment, do you think, or?
I feel that it's fair, but that's my opinion. I feel it's a fair assessment.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I'm not, making a blanket statement either way.
All right.
Because and we spoke about this before you started recording, that I feel like it's important to present people with the facts and allow them to draw their own conclusions from those facts.
All right.
I don't like what happened. I have my own opinions on that. But if I focus on what happened to me personally, and I don't allow people to draw their own conclusions, then I'm making it personal. And when it's personal, it's hard for people to really listen to it. The thing that we're doing, you and I are doing right here, this interview, for me, it's about me presenting my side of the story and the facts that I have to go with it, and allowing people to come to their own conclusion. Because the only way we're going to make change for real, and we're going to affect change, is that the citizens are going to have to draw their own conclusions from these circumstances. And hopefully they're sick and tired of having a lot of money going to the state government that is just spent to hire private contractors so that they can make a lot of money, or promote people within a family, or that are friends of a family. Hopefully they will see the need to really seek out justice. Not necessarily for me personally, because I shouldn't expect that of people, but hopefully because they see that the only way to make change effective and good is to look at the things that are wrong and do what they can to correct them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm assuming that that's how most of the U.S. government across the board, state governments, towns and cities operate the same way when they're not being watched, where there's no oversight and there's no fear of being arrested or having to pay back money that they waste or steal.
And that's why I opened myself up to an economic death penalty, because it's my desire that if I can tell people what it is that I know, having suffered an economic death penalty, and you know, I'm broke. So things are they're not good for me. But that's not the point. The point is that if I tell my story and I let people know what's going on, then perhaps other people will do the same. Because we know whistleblowers don't prevail. Whistleblowers get screwed, in plain English. So, if I go to you and somebody reads your blog, or you somehow get this printed in a newspaper of some sort, and people read that, then they'll say, gee, okay, this person spoke up. They got punished, but maybe there's somebody I can go to. Maybe somebody will look at what happened to me and say, you know, this is wrong. Something needs to be done about this. And not necessarily just for me. And maybe not necessarily something that'll help me, but something that'll help change it in the future. Then there's hope that they will change for the better. Because we don't need a corrupt government. And, you know, you're going to find corruption a lot of places. But I've given proof of this corruption. I've addressed the fact that somebody who assaulted me, and, you know, this is a very emotional thing for me, so I have to separate myself from it. But somebody who did this to me, I need to help bring this out to the open in a manner that can allow people to logically look at it and say, geez, these things have to change. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can't go back and relive what happened to me or change what happened to me, because I am stuck. It's a very bad position I'm in. However, I knew that this was a possibility. And you did too. When you first posted, you know, on the YouTube, that I probably wouldn't have a job after a while.
I didn't know that.
Responsibility for me. I knew it.
So you went in knowing that you could possibly, you know, you were possibly, by speaking out, you'd lose your job.
Something that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'd spoken about that. I had a boss that was harassing me, and I had filed a CHRO complaint. And let's face it, while I'm pointing out how my union president benefited from her position, I'm not making a friend out of the union either. So I was leaving myself way out open there to just have the roof fall in. And it did.
Whether you
It's not going to change the future.
whether you work inside the system or you're just a citizen, if you don't have a judicial branch that's doing their jobs or allowed to do their jobs, you have no valid constitution where there's any type of protection, because the check and balances, one of them is judicial branch. So if you want to prosecute people for wrongdoing within the system, you need a ethical and working judicial branch that is going to work in the public's best interest, not their own, for covering up organized crime, which is them.
Well, that's why I'm talking to you, because I believe people need to make their own decisions. And in the state of Connecticut, our budget deficit is growing every day. And although people are talking about making tough choices, this, that, the other thing, you know, do we really need 35 people paid as a deputy director on the state of Connecticut Judicial branch? I mean, do we really need that? Do we really need these people at the very top who stay there forever, whose pay grows every time there's an increase in pay? You know, do we need to, you know, have private contractors coming in and replacing state workers with people that are bound to be somewhat disgruntled because they're not being paid very well, and they're not really known? You know, do we need to have people within government who do wrong like Lorraine Murphy, keep her job and simply get moved into an area of special projects? You know, do we need to give managers 16 months paid sick time because they suffered from stress, because they had sexual harassment complaints filed against them? Do we need to do that? Do we need to create a position for a friend of an executive director simply because she wants a promotion? You know, all those things are questions we have to ask ourselves. How many program managers in the judicial branch do we really need? You know, should we be creating so many management positions when there's such a budget, deficit? In 2008, when Edna Press was given her position as supervisor over transcript services for the entire state of Connecticut, that job was held by Nancy Brown, who received her promotion to program manager, but no longer had to take on the title of supervisor of transcript services. So they moved her up just so they could create a position for Edna Press. Do we need to do that?
Does Edna Press have any real job responsibility for her maybe six figures?
She may not have even passed the court reporter's test. She was given a private court reporter's test by Nancy Brown.
So she may not even have to do anything.
For that.
So she might not even have to do a job to collect a check.
Well, she shows up to work, but if it's stormy weather or whatever, she doesn't have to go to Hartford. She gets to go to Bridgeport.
So that's that.
Closer to her home in Westport.
So there's probably a lot of employees that have little to do, little responsibility. They're making huge pay. They get huge retirement pay, lots of benefits, and they're not even needed.
I would say that's true. I have not experienced it personally other than knowing about Edna Press.
If investigate...
I also know that Edna Press, the person I'm talking to you about, helped somebody commit fraud against the state with regard to mileage. And then they promoted her.
They promoted the person that was caught for committing fraud?
No, they promoted Edna, who helped the person commit the fraud.
So that's not only fraud, that's conspiracy. So would you, if somebody were to report that to the system, they'd probably be fired. But people that abuse the system...
In fact, if you attach my name to that, and I don't care if you do, by the way,
Yep.
they'll probably try to come after me. Because that's one of the people that they protect, is Edna Press.
So if you abuse the system, you get promoted. If you try to inform the system about what's fraud and what's being done wrong, they'll go after you, retaliate against you, make you lose your job, and ruin your life. All right. For investigators that would come in to look over the judicial branch for wrongdoing, what would be the smoking gun? Where would they go to find the dirt?
They've already been looking for the dirt and find it The problem is they don't have any authority after they hand it over to the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General, has the whistleblower unit, which looks into this stuff, but the very fact of the matter is that that whistleblower unit is a small unit compared to the rest of the Attorney General's office. In addition, you've got the whistleblower unit investigating while the Attorney General's office is charged with defending it.
So you're reporting crimes to the person who's supposed to defend the people that are breaking the law?
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. Richard Blumenthal oversees the Attorney General's office. In fact, I got a nasty little letter from him telling me how, when I reported corruption in the judicial branch, how I should go and report it to the whistleblower unit. But he knows damn well that if you report it to the whistleblower unit and you're in a union, forget it. You're done. There's nobody to help you.
I believe I read on Richard Blumenthal, the Connecticut Attorney General's website, that he's the people's lawyer. So if you're complaining to him, you'd be complaining about him.
If you're complaining about a state agency, he's defending the state agency.
It sounds like it's a major conflict of interest, and that's probably why the system is as corrupted as it is.
Probably.
In closing, is there anything that you'd like to say or add, or?
No, I sent you Caroline's complaint, the complaint that I told you about, which addresses my situation. And I'm going to send you a copy of my 2002 complaint.
Okay.
Okay, if you want a copy of the current one, well, it's really long, but, so I'm going to be sending you another email attachment, and you'll have those as, proof. You're going to have to read through Caroline's before it gets to my name. I think it's like page 12 or something. But, I said I would send that to you, and I'm sending it to you, so, you'll have her complaint, and, she withdrew the complaint. But she did so, and I'm trying to figure out what page it is. Hold on. Maybe it's the wrong complaint I sent.
All right, I'll look for that. Okay, the Attorney General, if you go to complain to him, if you can't get anywhere with the Attorney General complaining about fraud, corruption, laws being broken, who would you go to get some sort of results if you can't go to the Attorney General of the state?
There's not a lot of places to go to.
So it sounds like if you make a complaint, it's scary. You're complaining to the person who's in charge of defending the person that you're complaining about, and that's where I see the retaliation coming in, because the Attorney General can send investigators out. So it could be real scary real quick if you complain to the dark side.
Yeah. Just so you know, on the bottom of page 4
Yes.
of the complaint that I sent you,
Yes.
that's where it talks about what happened to me in 1998.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Amazing. So should there be some sort of position, independent position, that would have some teeth as far as investigating this fraud, this breaking the law?
I would think so, but that's not how the state is set up, so.
Well, it sounds like it's set up to fit.
If you want somebody who's independent to be able to do those kind of things.
Well, right now it seems to be set up to fail. It seems to be set up to rip off, and it seems to be set up to protect itself against any type of cleaning up.
You're breaking up, Steve.
Okay. I haven't moved, and the cell phone is.
All right, I'm going to send you, I'm going to get off the phone because I can barely understand you.
Okay.
I'm going to send you a copy of the union complaint where they signed off on it too, talking about revisiting it in, 6 months.
Okay.
Okay?
Um,
Hearing's better, so.
thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, do you know what you're going to do with this yet?
I'm going to render it and listen to it, and then go from there. And if you have any suggestions, just give me a call on what you'd like to do.
You also understand that, like, and I want to make this very clear, I am trying to be logical and not involved in this case. I mean, I believe that that's the only way to get things done, you know, to be effective.
Well, the real world cases that involve wrongdoing, or somebody that they can't make a complaint and then they're retaliated against, it's not personal. It's just showing that the system is not working correctly.
Yeah, well, if I get all wrapped up in my own stuff, then I'm not effective at communicating the real problems. And that's my point.
I understand. All right. And if you, I'll start listening to it. If you want to give a call back.
And also, let me know if you get this email, okay?
All right, that I will.
Okay.
Thanks.